Hello and happy holidays. Welcome to SpyHards podcast. I am Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur, sharpening his teeth.
My oh my, don't they look nice, Cam? Which is strange because I would imagine they'd be full of Christmas joy and chocolates and turkey and everything right now. But you're taking good care of those Nashes.
That's right. I've got to ward off those chocolates. So I've got to be on the ball.
Absolutely. And as is tradition here at SpyHards, we come bearing gifts at this time of year. And I can't think of a better gift than this week's interview.
Yes, we are here this week to talk to screenwriter Seth Lochhead, who wrote 2011's Hannah, a movie that you and I have a lot of time for. It was an early inductee onto the knock list, as I recall.
Yeah, one of the first films I think we got really passionate about. And it's one of those films I think doesn't get as much love as it should. So I'm glad we tracked Seth down. And this interview gives you the full story of how we got 2011's Hannah. So without further ado, let's open the present. Cam, roll the interview. And joining us now on the show, the writer of 2011's Hannah, Mr. Seth Lochhead. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is very exciting. I've never really done anything like this before.
Oh, okay. We promise to not ruin everything for you. We'll
Okay,
try and
great.
make it as smooth as possible. And
I hope so.
well, I hope so too. You're setting us up for failure. This could all go downhill from here. Like it's.
I'm prepared for failure. I love it. I love living
Great.
in that. Yeah.
We relish failure. It's where we exist here on SpyHards.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we tackled Hannah over 3 years ago on the show.
Yeah.
And what we do on the show is try to find the best spy movies of all time to make a list. And we're making a list. We're checking it twice.
Yeah.
And Hannah was one of the early entries, and we stand by that film. And I personally think it's one of the best spy films of the last couple of decades, I would say.
Thank you very much. That's awesome. I did listen to it. I listened to the review, and I must say I was very impressed, and it made me very nostalgic and made me appreciate it once again, having the outside world kind of give feedback to it, especially two enthusiastic voices who loved it so much. It was very, very cool.
Well, I'm probably just as nerdy about it now as I was then. So strap yourselves in.
Oh, God.
But
I love it.
When we have guests on the show, I kind of like to build a picture before we get necessarily to like the nitty gritty of the film itself. So the question I always like to start off with is what inspired you to get into your crafts? So what made you want to be a screenwriter?
Well, I think that, it was my early 20s, and I was, I think I was kind of directionless, I guess is the best way of putting it. I think I was like working at Starbucks, and then at some point I shift over and I started doing blackjack dealing at night. So I'd stay up all night. And so, and it was like a weird time for me, but I always felt creative. I always felt like I wanted to be a writer. And I admired short story writers. I was very excited by short stories. And of course, there's no real, at least not one that I could have found at that time, a market for short stories. It's not a way to make a living. So I was like, well, what is the next best thing? How can I write and pursue my dream, pay the rent, and make that the focus of my life? And I'm like, oh, movies, of course, so easy. It's just transition over there. But yeah, so then there was the Vancouver Film School was a thing that was available, and I think I ended up getting a grant to go and go to this school, and that's what I did. I went to that school, and I always had the plan of I'm going to write something, and when I come out of the school, I'm going to send it off to Hollywood, and it's just going to get made right away. So, and that sort of happened. So that was kind of the weird part of it. So it's like I wrote Hannah there, and then I was able to string scripts together and build my career from there, while also hopefully in my mind anyways hold on to what why I was doing it, which is to make a living, but to make a living doing what I love, right? So always kind of privileging the love over the rent, if you will. So there you go. I don't know if that answered your question. but
No, it does. I also feel like that was a point in Vancouver too, where the film industry felt a little more accessible. Like I feel like
yeah,
growing up, not as much the case, but then in the 2000s, it felt like there was much more of a boom.
it definitely felt like there was people like they were making movies on the street. Like you could always, I mean, there was definitely. I do remember like on in North Van, like the like X-Files was filming all over the place there, and you could always hang out on set. And then when I was really like quite young, this is sort of influential on me, although I don't think I saw it, which is they filmed The Fly 2 at SFU, and I was Simon Fraser University, which is one of the two big universities in British Columbia, and but I was like 5 or 6, and I just remember seeing the helicopters flying around this university campus, and I was like, "Whoa, what's going on? What's this is amazing!" And so yeah, so you get that kind of like there is that bug, and then I would say also I'm like, oh, I love short stories, but I didn't love short stories until I was, in like 18, 19 years old. Before that, it's movies, right? It's blockbuster. It's whatever I could get my hands on. It's whatever's playing on television. And so my influence and always has been, even on my short stories is like cinema. It's the thing that always brought me back to it. So but when I was like, oh, I'm gonna do this, like I didn't think about the industry here. You know what I mean? I wasn't thinking very practically. Like I wasn't being very intelligent about my plan. My plan was like, no, I'm just gonna write a really good script, and it'll get attention, and then I can go off and have this, fairy tale career in Hollywood. So I don't know if there's a fairy tale aspect to it, but I would say that the inciting incident of my career is that motivation, I guess, which was very, naive is the best way of putting it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you said it though. It may have been naive, but you knocked it out the park. You wrote the script
Yep.
and you got it sold, and here we are talking about it. And my follow-up question was going to be influences, and you kind of mentioned it. But I'll throw a spanner in the works there a little bit, because we're talking about a spy movie that you wrote.
Yeah.
Was spy movies something you paid attention to growing up, or was this more of just a evolution of the script?
Yeah. I mean, I think they're very important to me. I think that this concept. So there was a couple things. So it's gonna get all mixed up, but like watching like the action movies of the 80s, like you know what I mean, like those were kind of huge. And then also translating them, or even like sometimes when you watch those movies, I was thinking about just the other day I was actually thinking about this, and I don't know if it was like a direct influence, but I was thinking about Commando, with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
And and then there's like, so what I was always looking for when I watched those movies was like human moments, you know what I mean? Like, so it was like, so I think it's always like, I don't know if it's just because of the way that I grew up, but you're always looking to squeeze emotion or relationships out of these kind of, out of Sylvester Stallone or Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's like what are you looking for in these kind of broad movies? And you're looking for these moments of that you recognize, right? And I think that those movies plus, and then as I got older, then I started watching like Kurosawa, and then so then it's like, oh shit, you have these cool action movies, and then they're also loaded with all of this human stuff, right? And so that was like a click. There was like something that clicked over, and then I would say I was a movie usher and when I was like 19, 20, and Bourne came out, the Bourne Identity, and I watched it. I probably watched it, I don't know, 10 times. I got to go in for free, so I watched it like 10 times, and I was like, there was something about that movie specifically at that time where I was like, there is something extra going on, that it wasn't just about bombast, it wasn't just about death, right, or body count. It was about a personal journey through and using that to access this personal journey. That's the way I interpreted it. And then I would say, like, although I feel I can't remember exactly the timeline on this. You guys probably know this, but then Casino Royale came out, and then you're starting to see that, right? You're starting to see that kind of like more emotion and more where you're leveraging the human experience of this heightened world. You know what I mean? And so that's really what I keyed in on, and I was like, can we do that for everything? Can we couple these, the excitement with the reality of what's really going on, right? And and have the character go through that process while still doing things that are exciting. If anything, it actually makes them more exciting. And that would be my philosophy, I think, which is if you can bring humanity to the bombast, I think that's kind of my MO for writing.
Well, you're bang on the money, because if you look at Born Identity and Casino Royale, both excellent examples of this, but you go back to the 90s and you look at things like True Lies or Goldeneye,
right?
They're very much plot-driven spy action films, whereas, eventually we go, oh, we actually would like to see a bit of characterization here,
Right.
and then Matt Damon knocks it out of the park, and then Bond goes, oh, I better do something similar, and then they do Casino Royale. Both great films, of course.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it was important. It was an important turning point, and I definitely think it gave me permission to pursue it, to pursue that line, if you will.
Well, both proved that it could be successful as well. Both were box office smashes. So you're like, oh, I can do this, and it's something that people want.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it was interesting because early on, there was this. The other one, I guess, was a big influence on me as a kid, was definitely like the Luc Besson movies, right? La Femme Nikita, and I think, I don't know if this was in the 90s or not, but they had the TV show in Canada, and I don't know if that was just a Canadian TV show, but they did like a La Femme Nikita TV show, which I really, really liked. So
it was worldwide,
and
it was worldwide.
Yeah, it was worldwide. Okay, and then there was and then there was The Professional. So The Professional, and like Gary Oldman, and like The Professional was, that was the other I think we used to pitch it as, Hannah is the professional in reverse, and I'm not exactly sure the math on that, like why we said that, but I would say that like the Jean Reno being so sweet and so deadly, there was some like his innocence, like that's the way I always read it. I know there's been controversy since then, but I always read him as such a sweet, innocent person, and then contrasting that with his extreme skill set was very, like, I'll say this, beautiful to me. Like I like that's like, I love that kind of stuff. I love the contrast of innocence with this, deadly skill, which I guess you can see is manifest in in the script. So in the movie Hannah. So yeah, so I'd say that would be another one that was very influential on me, actually. And because it is, I don't know, I haven't watched it for a while, but I feel like there is its own rhythm, its specific rhythm. Does that count as do assassin movies count in your mandate for SpyHard?
That is an argument that rages on. We do tackle assassin and hitman movies, and the listeners come down on either side of the argument.
That's great. That's awesome. That's fantastic. So have you guys done that or La Femme Nikita or
Leon will be out in a few weeks. So
wow,
yeah, we've got an interview with one of the people that made it as well. Like, we've got a lot coming up with that.
Oh wow!
I think it's actually going to be our 150th episode. Funnily enough,
that's fantastic. I really, I mean, I just listened to your Mission Impossible podcast, which I loved. I'm actually wearing, I don't know if you guys can see, I'm wearing my Mission Impossible watch. This is from from the
look
first
at that. I love it. That's dedication.
That's right.
Dedication.
Well, it's you can't get, there's no, like, I think the Bond watch, like the one from that Sean Connery wears, I think it's like, I don't know, $100,000. This one was $60. So it's I don't know. I gotta get my movie fandom in there somehow. But yeah. But I really dug it. So I'm really looking forward to that. I feel like you've definitely acquired a new fan of your podcast by reaching out to me. So I really appreciate it. So
I'll take that. Someone who actually wrote a very good spy movie likes our podcast. That's genuine high praise. I actually mean that.
Well, no, I even feel like, so, and then I don't know when I started following on Twitter, but like within the last month or so. And then you've given me like the Ipcris files, which I never heard of, which I'm like, oh, okay, what is this? And then I'm like, okay, I bought it, so then it's coming. I'm really looking forward to seeing that. So it's like, I don't know, I love deep cuts. I love your guys' passion for this genre. Hey, I love movies, so you're gonna always find a fan with me.
We can all agree to that. And you have to let us know what you think about the Ipcris file, because it divides this podcast. But I'll let
Really?
you get to that when you
It
get
does.
there.
Okay,
I'll,
okay.
I'll save that. But I think
I'm very excited.
we're almost at the stage now, and you sort of told us how you got to that point, but we haven't really got to Hannah.
Yeah.
And so you went to film school, and you said your idea was to write a script and go and sell it to Hollywood. But where did that sort of concept of Hannah itself come from?
So pretty like straightforward, which is they asked for like log lines or pitches. So I pitched two projects, and one was based off of like I was gonna go two paths. I was either gonna be the action writer or I was gonna be Woody Allen, right? So I like pitched a Woody Allen teen sex comedy, and I pitched Hannah. And Hannah, for me, at the time, it started sort of like from a dream. Like it was like this image of a little girl running through the trees, passing these trees. And that's all I could really see. And I was like, why is she there? Why is this girl running through those trees? And so I pitched both of them. I was horrible at pitching. I'm still horrible at pitching. and then everyone voted on which one you should write. And they voted for the teen sex comedy. So I went and I started writing the teen sex comedy. And I'm like, this is not what I want to write. I want to figure out where this little girl, what she's doing out in the middle of the wilderness. And so I gave up on that. I think I still have that somewhere, like 70 pages, and it's complete. That's the complete script. It was 70 pages. It was very, very sad. So that's technically my first script, is this teen sex comedy, which is very bad. And then I was like, okay, now I'm going to transition over to Hannah, and it was just simply to answer that question, why is she there? And so at every step of the way, right? Like, so you start with okay, she's there, she's hunting. All right. Oh, she's killed something. Oh, wait a minute, who's that behind her? And it's like, oh, that's her dad, or it's this parental figure. And is he trying to kill her? What's happening? So then I kind of like, it's like I kind of just meandered through this place, drawing from my memory of good movies and my memory specifically of my travels I had when I was 18, 19 years old. I traveled through Europe for about 5 months, and drawing from those experiences, and also the underlying experience, like my memory of the feeling of what it was like to travel there. And so all of a sudden it became kind of this, like almost like a travelogue, punctuated with violence. Is the best way of putting it. And so and as we were doing this, I was giving pages to my mentor, Rick Drew, and he was one of the teachers at VFS, and he was just like a cheerleader, and he was supportive, and he just said, this is great, this is so awesome, just keep going. And then by the end of graduation, I think I'd gotten 60 or 70 pages into Hannah, and then I took the next 3 or 4 months after graduation to kind of finish it off, and also start to like search for the person to take it on, right? Who could help me access Hollywood. And I started to email management companies anywhere I could find emails or contacts. I would query these places and see if they would be interested in reading the script. So I wrote it in film school. I finished it a couple months after film school, and then I was querying whoever would answer me for the next couple months after that. And then someone did answer me, and it was 2 people. There was a direct-to-video company, which I cannot remember the name of anymore, but the guy was very nice. He got on the phone with me. I think he pitched that he wanted me to change it to a male lead instead of a female lead. Yeah. And then I was like, no, I don't think I want to do that. And then there was this young guy at Circle of Confusion, which was a management company in LA. And I think he was an assistant at that point. And he read it and he just loved it. And he pitched me to his bosses, and he, became a manager. He became my manager. And from there, through his team there, his name was Kemper Donovan. And then one of his mentors, Ashley Burns, ended up taking it to Europe of all places and handing it off to Focus UK, where they optioned it. And I remember getting on the phone with the executive there, Teresa Maneo, and she was very enthusiastic and interested in the project. And I had to just like, they were very, so at the time, everything had like compartments, right? So it's like, is this an art house movie or is this an action movie? And I had to pitch, no, it's both. So it's like, and I was like, it's both. And I was fairly aggressive with pitching that angle on it. And they did option it, and then I did a rewrite for them, and then years passed, and then the movie got made.
Well, I was going to ask about that because when I watch the movie, it feels like it's taking a very unconventional approach to material people know well, kind of the spy thriller, the hitman story. Did it feel like unconventional when you were putting it together, or were you eyeing it more as a major commercial release?
No, I would never. I never thought of it as a commercial release. In fact, there was another offer on the table with a more straightforward genre company, and I actually and there was more. It was more money too, and I turned them down to go with Focus because I felt that Focus was putting out movies that spoke to me, and I thought that they would be much more diligent in keeping the tone and oddity of what it was. I think and a lot of that was, some of it is by design, some of it is my influences, right? Some of it is that I didn't know what I was doing, right? So, and some of those rough edges, and I still advocate this, for any young writer. Some of the rough edges are what makes it special. And that was kind of like, and I would actually I would fight to keep that stuff in, because sometimes it is more valuable and interesting to have something great against expectations, right? So if you're like, oh, I completely understand where she's coming from, or I completely understand why Hannah takes this action, well, then I think that that's not really my goal, right? My goal is to inspire in the audience the question of, or what is your investment? What do you understand that she's doing, instead of me providing that answer? I ask the question, the audience provides the answer. And I think that that's much more exciting way to interact with cinema, in my opinion. So.
Well, it's more engaging, I would say, in that perspective. Like you're asking the viewer to actually make up their own choice and come to their own conclusions. The ending, for instance, which we will get into at some point, is there's different endings we could talk about. Like there's a lot of permutations of this. But looking at the sort of story you just said about creating the script, selling it, taking it to Hollywood, or taking it to Britain, technically speaking.
Yeah.
See, there's a British connection here. So we're all connected.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's all good.
Well, I wrote some pages in London. Like there was one point where Joe was in London and they flew me from Berlin to London. So I did write some of Hannah in London. So there you go.
It's connected.
That's right.
We have a connection. Well, you mentioned that sort of, I think you said 60 or 70 page treatment before it got through Focus, and then you added some more to it or made some changes. What was that original version of the story looking like, and how was it maybe different to what we eventually got?
Well, I would say that like the first act has always been the first act, basically. So it's always been pretty much the same. And then there was some, I would always say, my argument is, so there's different aspects, there's different corollaries, right? So there's always a family, but the family is a different makeup, right? The locations are different. Mine was I want to say Turkey played heavily into it, so there was a whole big section in Turkey. So that stuff was really interesting. And then I would say that there was certain things, I mean, they're still there, but maybe we put them off screen a little bit, which is Marissa's brutality. So she was quite brutal in the original script. And I mean, she still is, but she was even more so. And yeah, like, I mean, I might, the issue here is like, I don't even know anymore. It's like, I can kind of vaguely remember that. I can vaguely remember the thing I rewrote. I think I ended up there was like a set piece in Sardinia. That was one thing I added to the rewrite. And then I can think about what it became with the other with David Farr's draft.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was the work I did on set. So which was bringing back in a lot of elements that were that had been like basically bringing back in a lot of the edge that had been taken away, and the conventionality that was added to the script. That in some ways there was lots of really cool things that were added to the script, and like the false Marissa was a really nice, that was an addition that came in with David Farr's work, and so I love that. I think it's fantastic. And Miles was a character that didn't exist in the previous draft. Actually, the Sophie character, or the equivalent, was just a younger girl, because I always pictured Hannah as being quite, even if she was 15, 16 years old, she was quite young, right, in her experiences of life. But so aging Sophie up, and then adding in Miles and having still that kind of young child perspective, which was interesting. So that kind of came in as the draft, as it developed, and then the kind of like the stuff that, but it always kind of was and I guess I actually there was quite like a serious set piece in the first draft with, like, Hannah being taken in, and then basically going after Marissa, but going through people to get to her. Do you know what I mean? Like, like really crazy, like old boy level of like just a really over the top action set piece. Whereas that, and then as the drafts went on, that getting quieter, right, and that being pulled back, which was really nice. And then there was stuff that came in, because I never originally conceived of it as like a soft sci-fi, right? I always thought of it as like social conditioning, like a BF Skinner, like a psychological study of, he always used to say, if you give me a child from birth, I can raise them to be whatever I want to be. So that was kind of my concept, which is, okay, what is Eric doing to Hannah? What is he doing to Hannah to create her and to make her this thing that can, go out into the world and protect herself, if you will. And so that was always my concept. So as that developed, then there was this kind of like this, and I actually think, and I think this is less true now, but there was always seemed to be this thing where people were like, oh, can she do this? Like, can a 16-year-old kid, like, without enhancement, be this way? And I'm like, well, why not? So that was always like, why not? But so I think that at some point they needed an answer to that, as some people do. And so they added in the enhancement stuff. And so what the draft that I read, it was all about that. It was all about explaining the science fiction stuff. So then it goes back to, it was like, this underground facility and all this kind of things that were happening, scientifically. And I was like, well, let's get back to the crux of it. What's Hannah's experience? What's her mission? What is her story, right? And so that was kind of like, so it started out that way. I started to begin to strip it back. Then we got a version of it that was much cleaner and had the edges kind of taken away, but there was a lot of cool elements that were added to it. And then I came in and I'm like, well, what are we trying to do here? Whose story is it, right? What's the title of the script? So I think that kind of gives you the evolution of Hannah up until, and then of course there's the filming of it, and then the editing of it, which kind of obviously changes it a lot as well. But
I'm glad you don't over-explain Hannah's current predicament, situation, condition, as it were, because like I think she says a line where it says like abnormal when she reads it from her blood sheet. Like there's hints about things, but if you over-explain stuff, you take, for instance, you mentioned Born Identity. Like you hear about Treadstone,
right,
the program that trained Matt Damon's Jason Bourne, but you get it super explained to you in the Bourne Ultimatum, and you're like, I don't care about this stuff. Like this is just boring, snoozy stuff.
100%.
And I appreciate more the sort of ambiguity, really, because you don't know what she's capable of. She could be like, you know, she could be Superman, but she doesn't quite know it yet. She could be the destroyer of worlds. Who knows? So
That's
yeah,
right.
I think it was a good choice.
Good. I'm glad. I mean, I have this philosophy, and I feel like it's like or Hitchcock said it, and then I just adopted it as my own, which is like it's the point isn't the MacGuffin, right? Like it's not that's not the point. It's the excuse to tell the story. And at some point, we were like, no, we got to explain the MacGuffin. We're going to spend 90 minutes explaining the MacGuffin. And it's like, I'm not here for that. I'm here to hang out with these cool characters and to expose myself to the emotional journey that they're going through. And at least that's what I watch movies for. I don't watch it for the MacGuffin. So and I think that I was not interested in that. And that's something that I even now like I always force myself to strip away any kind of explanation of that kind of stuff and focus on whose story is this and what does it mean, what is the ending for them, right? What does it mean for them to get to the end, not for us. So yeah.
And I'm curious, Joe Wright comes on and ultimately directs the movie, but wasn't it being developed with other directors at a certain point, like Alfonso Cuarón?
I think so.
Were you at all talking to these
No.
directors? You had no sense of kind of like where they were looking to maybe push the story?
No, I wasn't. I mean, I'd read one of the, I think I'd read the first draft of that Farr wrote, and I think he was developing it with Danny Boyle, or at some point Danny Boyle got involved. And then what I was hearing, and this is an interesting thing actually. I think what I heard, or it was an interview or something like that, Danny Boyle was talking about being a parent, and which I always thought was an interesting take on it, because again, it's not the story. It's not about being a parent. Right? It's about being a kid. And so I always thought that was interesting. And so yeah, no, other than just like hearing the grapevine and yeah, it was a very strange time, because it can be very cruel when you're starting out in this business. It's like I believe as I was doing a rewrite, David Farr was being hired, so I hadn't even finished my rewrite. So so the transition there was interesting and heartbreaking, of course. And so there was a period of time where it was like, it was exciting because I love Danny Boyle, and you hear that he's going to do it, and that's really, really cool. And I was really looking forward to him when I heard about it, I feel like I was actually in India. I was in Mumbai, and they just released Slumdog Millionaire, and I saw Slumdog Millionaire in Mumbai, and it was like this kind of weird, cool thing. Anyways, neither here nor there, but yeah. So you hear about it, you're excited, this is amazing. Then you get disappointed because he dropped out, and then you hear about Alfonso Cuarón, and this just happened. I'm not exactly sure how it was going, but I wonder if they were just working towards a green light. And then Alfonso Cuarón's name popped up, and I don't know if he actually developed. I don't know if he did it, if there was a draft under him. And then Joe Wright was pretty quickly involved after that, and then Saoirse was announced pretty quickly as well. And then and this, I think you guys were trying to guess, and from the story I heard, she did bring Joe in on it, or she sent him the script. So it's a good piece of myth that seems to be true.
Well, I'd love to know, Joe Wright comes on, and I'd seen an interview with you where you talked about how a lot of the fairy tale elements were more under the surface, right, whereas Joe wanted to bring those more to the forefront. I'd just like to know, as you're working with him, how sort of that affects the storytelling and the script.
Well, so I would say I didn't even know how extreme he was going to go until I started seeing people, until I started seeing like the costumes, seeing the sets, like when we were talking about like the emotion and it was never really because at least flattery or whatever, self-flattery, which is, I think, because I was creating, I always described it as, I wanted to write a Grimm's fairy tale. I didn't want it to be based on a Grimm's fairy tale. So I wanted it to be able to, you open up your book of fairy tales and there's Hannah, right? And you can, and so that's the way I thought about it. So it's like the direct references to it, and like these, like, even like stuff like, I think the Kate's costume being green, and like there's the green being connected to something. There's something that's specific. The woodsman, right? He's dressed like a woodsman. It has this, and then even I think that Saoirse's wig was based off of a puppet. I think it was like a Little Mermaid puppet that Joe's family, like I think his parents were puppet makers, and they would go on tour and do puppets, and that hair was on a Little Mermaid puppet that he worked on, or that his family had worked on. And so then all of a sudden, I'm in Berlin. It's 3.5 weeks. We're talking about all of this stuff, and I'm seeing like figments. I'm seeing like stuff around, but I'm not necessarily connecting the dots until day one of shooting, when Saoirse comes on set and she's like in full garb, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is really interesting. Like, this is like it was not. It's so funny. It's like, it's not what I had in my head, but it felt so right. Like, it felt, and so I would say, like, we did not talk actively about it. It just was happening. So I'm sure he was talking to other people about it, like Sarah, the production designer, and the costume, and like, I'm sure that this was in their heads, but yeah, we didn't actively talk about it. That's long story short.
That's interesting, because I was watching a behind the scenes doc on the Blu-ray, and Saoirse Ronan references, though I was told that I'm like the Little Mermaid,
Right.
and I didn't even think of the doll thing. I wouldn't have known that, but I was thinking more so of the flipping the switch moment.
Yeah.
Which to me, I really think of like Ariel and the Little Mermaid and the I want to be where the people are.
Yeah.
Which Hannah, the same thing. It's like, yes, she is comfortable in her environment, but there's something bigger out there.
Yeah. So for me, that switch I added because they had a question of what like literally, like the question was, what initiates the onslaught? What initiates this transition? And I'm like, well, what if Eric, hit a little, signal out in the middle of the forest? So it's like, I was not clocking that. Joe clocked it, I think. Like, Joe saw it, and then so through his lens, for me, it just felt natural. I was like, okay, this is a good way of, like, it's so simple, it makes sense, and it's so clean because you get to see her choice, right? And it does fit whatever my MO was, whatever my gut or my intuition was. And then Joe, and this is what I would say of like the way I always think about like directors is that they're the ultimate readers, right? You're getting his read, and he gets to manifest it visually, the way that it spoke to him. And I think that connecting, like, I didn't think of that until you just said it, even though I just said she was based on the Little Mermaid puppet, but that makes complete sense to me, right? What you just said. So it all aligns with, like, it's a very interesting thing, because it's like, and this is specifically, you're tapping into like an existential thing that I'm going through right now, which is, as I've aged as a writer, I'm becoming more and more conscious of my influences, and to my detriment. So it's like, it's much more beautiful and simple to be like, well, I always think of the button as a fairy tale element, right? But just an element, not taken from anywhere. And but to have people connect to it, take their experiences and interpret it that way, and then to add and to fill in the subtext. Like, I think that's actually what the beauty of directing is. Like, it's like he added another layer that allowed people to access the story the way he felt it, but also the way that I was strangely telling it, to inspire that feeling. So that's really cool. Good observation.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know much about the Little Mermaid thing until Cam and I were talking about it before recording. But the bit I took from what Cam was saying, and what was obviously in the bonus features, is more just that sort of, because a big part of the story is the coming of age of
Yep.
Hannah, and the sort of and it's part to do with the Little Mermaid and that sort of sense of wonder at the world, because there are moments where she's not worried about being chased down by Tom Hollander. There's moments where she's just like sitting under the sheets with her friend, or on a motorbike, on a moped with a boy, doing things that girls or boys should be doing at that age. And I think that plays into it beautifully as well. But speaking of Saoirse, it was a question I had. You mentioned sort of her and that sort of chicken and the egg of Joe Wright, who came first. But when you were writing it, and it had been picked up, and I imagine you were thinking to yourself, who should be playing Hannah? Who would I like to play Hannah? And we have Saoirse, and Saoirse is, I mean, she's one of the best actors going in my book. But who did you envision in the role?
I didn't that's like, I would say the only person, and this is a fact, was that that it was Kate. All I thought about was Kate for Marissa. And like right from the beginning, probably because she was one of the best to do it, you know what I mean? So it's like, but for the other actors, I was very like, and this is still true, which is I don't see them. I don't see the like, and I don't know why I have this block this way, and like, but I don't, and I would say, and I don't know if it's a positive or a negative. I can't decide yet. But when, and this is true of Saoirse, and this is true of Eric, which is that and Tom. To be honest with you, Tom would be. We can talk about that a little bit, but Isaacs as a character was written on set, right? So it was a very strange experience, which we can talk about later. But the Saoirse and Eric kind of embodied the feeling of these characters, right? And that's what, I guess that's what I'm looking for. So I can't always like think about an actor and go, like do they feel this way? Like I wouldn't have thought about Eric feeling this way until I met him or thought about him in the context of, oh, he's interested in playing this role. And I'm like, whoa, that makes so much sense. Like that, it's perfectly aligned, because he's very warm and soulful, and then you have that contrasted with how harsh and brutal he is. So it's like he can be harsh and brutal, but because he's so naturally a nice person, that you read that, and so it complicates that character without me having to, we have to like fill in the gaps, right? And then like with Saoirse, I mean, I think this is true of a lot of her younger roles anyways, is that she's so open, her face is so open and so innocent. It's the same kind of concept, which is like, it's like, to see her do brutal things, it's almost strangely tragic. And whereas, so I don't know if there was another person who could have done it that way. Like it had to specifically be this kind of, and I think I do actually think the way that she looked and the way that she, like, I think he even took out her eyebrows, or they lightened her eyebrows as well. So it's like there was something about her that made her alien, but also very human. You know what I mean? And it was a cool trick. And so both of those characters, like, I didn't know until they were in front of me. And then with Kate's just brilliant. So it's like, so I was just like, that will be my focus, is on this bad guy of if I was going to write one role for somebody, it would be for her. And I mean, aspirationally, I had no idea that I didn't even know she was going to get cast when she got cast. So I was just like, okay, that's cool. Very weird. Very, very weird.
Was the dental fixation in your script?
No, I think that was actually, I felt like, so there was one point where Joe, there was like, I can't remember the timeline on this, but I was called in at Christmas. I was like it was Christmas, like 2009, maybe that's what it was. And I was called and talked to Joe, and Joe said he was doing something with the script, but he wanted me to come in January to Berlin to work on it. And I think he had done a pass where he added in these kind of strange details. But the teeth were fantastic. Like, it's so nice. I love it. I love all that kind of creepy stuff. And it's like, that's really stuck with me. Like, and I mean, I was always like a big Cronenberg guy, like, and I just love, I love visceral, creepy stuff. And characters doing stuff that as characterization. So it was really great. I mean, I indulged in it a little bit once it was there, but Joe added that for sure.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Calling all agents. Keeping the lights on at SpyHards HQ ain't cheap. And frankly, nor is feeding this school of attack piranhas. So we need your help.
Roger that, Scott. Only at the SpyHards Patreon can you gain access to exclusive shows like Agents in the Field, which tackles non-spy films starring your favorite spy icons, and The Debrief, where we channel our inner solitaires and predict how the big spy movie news of today will impact tomorrow.
So make like a Treadstone agent and activate your Patreon membership at patreon.com/spyhards today. Cam, tell the people what we have in our sights this week.
Scott, in addition to the Christmas movie reviews on the Patreon, we're also going to release the year's final installment of The Debrief, where we're going to wrap up 2023 in style and perhaps even take a look at the John le Carré documentary, The Pigeon Tunnel.
But before this message self-destructs, Cam, resume the spy chinks.
And I was curious with the character of Hannah, who's so internal.
Yeah.
And, we talk about Saoirse's performance and how much just comes through what she's able to bring to a scene wordlessly. What is that like on the page when you're writing the journey of that character and so much is just in her head?
Yeah, I mean, this is my curse, is that I strip it back to its bare minimum, and I hope that people can read between the lines. It really is all about subtext for me. It's all about what is going on underneath the surface, and that's why I think it's so important who is playing these roles and who is directing it, right? It's like, I think that it's like, if someone doesn't understand that and wants to fill in the gaps, or wants a guided tour of what all the cool stuff that's happening in this movie, well, then we're probably in a lot of trouble, right? So if who has the balls to put it on the screen and to allow an actor to do what's so brilliant and magical about acting, which is to give us this complex inner life just by being on screen. and so it's like, so I think it's like an act of faith, really. It's like that I'm going to find people who understand this. And so on the page, it reads straightforward. And ideally, if you're reading it, you will feel it because you are invested. It's the same way we were talking about earlier, which is it's the investment in ambiguity, right? It's the investment in you're taking part of yourself and trying to answer the questions. So it's a trick. Like, it's a really hard trick to pull off, because especially in my business, which is all about answering. Everyone wants answers. Like, there's no way, like, it's so difficult. And that's probably why the way the script developed, right? So it's like there had to be a draft where the answers were provided, or it wouldn't get to where it got to. People needed the answers, and then what you need to do when you have the answers, if people don't have faith to greenlight it on an ambiguous draft, then you come back in and you strip it back down, right? And you strip it back to its essence. Because if you don't, then you're going to lose that audience investment, in my opinion. You're going to lose the emotion.
Well, I don't. You sort of teased the Tom Hollander story, and I don't want to let that go, because I love Tom Hollander, and I
He's
want to
great.
find out anything about the guy, because I'd love to have him on the show someday. He's on my list.
Oh, I love him. He was fantastic. He was so fantastic. He was just like, it was a very strange process, because it was fairly conventional henchmen, and I feel like there was always some kind of conventional henchman that existed throughout everything. And so there was this Isaac's character but then Joe introduced this concept of like the neo-Nazi, the whatever those guys are, right? And then we supposedly were going to get this guy, Niels Arstrup, who was in a movie called A Prophet. So A Prophet was really popular at that time. Like, Joe gave it to me to watch. It was fantastic. It's like one of my favorite movies, actually. It's a fantastic movie. And Niels Arstrup is just fantastic, but he's actually much more. He feels like your typical, gangland guy, you know what I mean? Like a French guy who's he could do damage. He's a bad guy. And then he dropped out because we were going a little bit, we were starting to like play with it a little bit and going a little bit bigger. And I think that he dropped out because he started to get nervous that he couldn't play big. But I don't know if that's true or not. And then there was a list of guys that we went through, like that we thought about. And then and I don't know if Joe and Tom worked together previously, but they knew each other really well. And so he's like, well, what do you think about this? And I'm like, that could be really cool. And we started to really like to really fabricate like the velour track suits, the way he talked, the concept too of that. Obviously Tom and Eric are very different people, like physically. So it's like, if Tom or Isaacs is going to function in this world, he's going to have to be pretty brutal. Like he's going to have to be, he's going to have to be scary outside of his physicality, more so with what he was willing to do. And so like it was very fun actually, because I would write these like, I don't know, 3 or 4 page emails about how horrible Isaacs was, so, as we were building this character. And then Tom, he came in and just fucking owned it, man. And he always vaguely, I don't think he's actually a method actor, but he was always vaguely Isaacs. Like whenever he talked to me, and it was like just slightly unsettling. And then he would do little cool things. He added lines. He was one of the few people who he improv lines and stuff like that, like "Run Little Piggy" when he's driving down the car, and all this kind of fun stuff. And and he was just really good. And him and Kate really had good chemistry. And it was like, and it just I feel like thinking back on it, I'm just like, they're a very unique group of bad guys that you believe 100% do awful things, and it's very easy for them, and it makes them kind of scary, and it makes you worried that if Hannah gets grabbed by them, that something real bad's going to happen. And that was always kind of the concept. Fantastic. It was super fun.
I just can't shake the idea of him walking around set whistling now and just like scaring the crap out of everyone.
It was such a cool. There was one scene where I think they were doing the interrogation, and I don't know if we ever got a wide shot of it, but they had, the way that we had done it was like in I think it was a warehouse. And so they had lined up, I think everybody was in those, what are they called?
The shipping containers.
Thank you. And so he would just walk back and forth with his steel pipe and whistle. And so the other thing too is I didn't know that the Chemical Brothers were involved, but they were involved at that point. And then of course, like Joe's like, "Oh, come listen to this," and I'm like, "What the fuck? What is this?" He says, "Oh no, this is for the movie." I'm like, "What? Who is this?" And so he's like, "Oh yeah, they're my friends. We used to do stuff like back in the day. I used to like direct their like something in a club or something like that for them." And I'm like, "Wow, this is crazy." Anyways, so the whistle was composed. It was, so the Chemical Brothers provided it, and then Tom had to learn it, and he would I just very much remember him walking around with the pipe, whistling on set, and it was very intimidating and strange. It was like all of it was very strange, because like even the cabin, like the cabin was probably this exposure, like when that is one thing where I'm like, okay, this did come out of my head, that's uncanny, and that was very strange. Like, so it's like, and then that I was so close to that moment, like I was so close to Isaac, so that was even some of the stuff that was so fun was to see it, to do it, and then to see it be done like the next day, right? Like there was the scene where Eric attacks Kate. Like I wrote that like 3 days before. So all we knew is that we had a hotel room, and so we wrote this like, and then there was one, I always remember that he's like, what was it? He's like, they were doing smoke, and he's like, "Oh no, this is too Tony Scott." So we had to down place. And so it was really neat to see all these talented people go, "Here's some pages, and we're going to build out this action set piece, right? We in that time frame. So I write those pages. We meet with a CIA agent, like a consultant, with Kate,
Mm-hmm.
and we're talking about, we debate whether or not she'd be scared in that scene. And it was like, it was so, and that's a 4-day cycle of building out this thing that becomes fairly aggressive and powerful in the middle of the movie. And you can see Kate starting to build her character, and then literally all these other craftspeople putting it together, and the stunt people trying to figure out who's going to wear the green suit, so when they pull the guy back from the door when he gets shot in the face, it's like, it was just so neat. It's just so, like, it's like this wonderful efficient circus, and all from, like, these lines on a page, which is insane. So it was like this inspiring thing where it's like, I don't know how to describe it. So it's like, we'll go back to Tom, but like him coming in, and us building this character for him, and his, I think he could probably, even if we wrote a different character, he could have pulled it off. But I think specifically he relished how he was just brave. Like, he was brave, and he went with it. He knew where, he trusted Joe, and he went 100% in the paint. You know what I mean? So it was great.
Well, he's an interesting character in that he's like very ambiguous in some ways, very playful, but also very scary and violent. And the whole time I'm watching the movie, I'm thinking, like, you guys beat Skyfall by a year. Like, Silva feels a lot
Interesting,
like this character.
Oh, that's a very, very interesting parallel. I like that parallel. I'll take it as a compliment.
Yeah, definitely. Big time.
Well, one thing we kind of slightly grazed over was you getting that call back. You said you'd sold the script, it'd gone off, you'd gone through some directors, but you weren't really involved at that point. It'd been handed off to another screenwriter. You've done your job.
Wrote a script.
You went to school, you wrote the script.
That's right.
And you sold it to Hollywood. Like, you tick, 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 tick. And you get a call. Joe Wright's directing. We want you to come back and do some rewrites on it. Like, that must have been a bit of a shock to the system. Like, a bit of part of you thought you were sort of done with it.
I never thought I was done with it, because I was so attached to it, and I always was looking for ways to get back, even if it was unrealistic, and like, just dreaming. And so, yeah, it was sort of this thing where it's like, I don't know, it's silly to say, but it felt like it was the right thing to happen. So it's like I'm like, I knew it as soon as I got the call. I knew this was going to happen. I knew it, and it was all going to work out. And it was, and so when that call came, it was just, and it was very intense, and it was so fast. Like, I was in Berlin within like 2 weeks, like, of getting a phone call, and then like, at first they're like, yeah, just come hang out for 3 weeks. And then, why don't you stay another 3 weeks? And then I was there 3.5 months, right? And so it's like, it was this weird fairy tale. It was like this weird thing where it's like, it's almost like, it's the cliche. It's like, it's what people, hope would happen if they sold the script, And even though I would say, like, obviously there's a lot of turmoil, and there's a lot of emotion, and there is a whole aspect of business that I will just ignore, because that would definitely ruin the dream. But the passion of my belief in this project, in this script, and in what I want, like, what I saw it could be, and how special I think it could be. I had this feeling that somebody else will find it, and we'll find each other, and that's how I see it happening. And maybe it's, from in the big picture, objectively, it was just, some smart business decision, or it's like some other decision that went into it. And so, or they wanted a young writer to come on set for 3 months to, give up whatever he was doing to come and hang out for 3 months and do rewrites. So it's like, but for me, I was like, oh yeah, this is fated. This was meant to be. And Joe was the guy that was gonna do it. And and it felt that way. It felt special. Like it felt the whole time felt special. And being there was, it was never, there was never extreme conflict. There was never, it was always very pleasant. There was exhaustion and there was things that happened, I think, like as uh less so for me because my job was done sort of 6 weeks into the pre-production. But you could just see as we were progressing, like people getting tired and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, there was nothing from my experience where it was like that people were losing the focus or trying to do something that it wasn't. They weren't trying to make it something other than it was. So yeah, it was really cool. It was really intense, and it definitely it changed my life in positive ways. I'd say, like, that's the best way of putting it. It made me think about movies in a different way. It made me see how special. I mean, I always believed it, but really, truly, like how talented people are and how much so I have this belief. Okay, I want to write a script. This is going to inspire people. This is my philosophy. This will inspire people to do their best work, and that's kind of what I saw happening. People were inspired to be creative and to exploit their talents in the belief that we were doing something special. So yeah, it was cool. Long story short.
Along the way, was there any scene or element of the script that was like the toughest obstacle to overcome, like the biggest challenge you found?
Not off the top of my head, like because it felt very creative, right? So there was things that happened before, like in development, that where I actively disagreed with executives on where they wanted to go with it. That was challenging. But from my feeling is that because they weren't thinking about the script or what its intent was, they were thinking arbitrarily about other issues. Like the best, like, so, without like getting too specific, but when an exec says, let's try to make it a male character, well, they're thinking about something other than the script, right? And so that happened. And then what was happening on set, it just felt very creative. I don't know if I was probably somewhat protected from, there was definitely issues around the ending and around violence, and they wanted, multiple versions of it or whatever. And so there was definitely some debate around that. But there was nothing that for me, I mean, I suppose there was one of the debates we had was around the Eric's fighting. So this happened in post-production. So Eric fighting with Isaacs at the end, right? So there was the way it was filmed was quite it was very wide, and it was not brutal. It was very like poetic, and so there was some debate around that where it's like on the page, it's like he's extremely wounded. He's bleeding out. He is going to die. So when Kate kills him, it's like you could make an argument that there's no chance for him anyways. He's already dead. And so, but there was certain things that were happening in the way that they conceived the set piece, where it wasn't as brutal, right? It wasn't as he wasn't as damaged. And I think that became a point of, it's not conflict, that's not the right word, but it felt that we kind of like maybe needed to do a little bit more work to make it feel, and we ended up doing it, and just through editing. So it's like, so it became more brutal. It still kind of leads to that same conclusion. And so, yeah, that was probably the toughest part, like the battle that we had. But outside of that, everything else was quite smooth, and there was no real like philosophical disagreements, because, well, and I mean, that's the other thing that happens in production, is like sometimes it's just reality. Like there was a point where there was going to be a rave scene, was going to be a big rave scene. And it's like, well, we don't have the money anymore to do that. So we turned it into the gypsy camp, right? Like, so it was and so that was just, and then I was writing, we were flying back from London and we wrote that scene on the plane. Joe and I were sitting across from each other, and so that was cool, and it was neat, and it still did the same thing, right? And a lot of the times, like, so there was certain things that preceded, so I don't know who put them in or what, but there was certain things like where Hannah actually kisses the boy, right? Well, we changed that because we're like, well, that doesn't feel natural, doesn't feel like her character, it doesn't feel like she would do that. And then just how the relationship developed between Hannah and Sophie, and that like the weird effect that they had on each other, how in a weird way Sophie becomes more human the more she spends time with Hannah, and so does Hannah. She becomes more human the more time she spends with Sophie, and so there was this like impact, and so there's just those really neat things, these things that came out as we pushed on it. So yeah, no, at the end of the day, I would say I can't think of anything fundamental that we were, like I think one of them was one thing I always, and I still think about it, there's a point where Kate's just realized something, and then she's standing in a hallway and she goes, fuck. All right. She just says fuck. And it's in this, I think that's what's in the movie. But my draft is like, no, it's nothing. You just see her. So that's an example of like, there's a moment where it's like, that was one of the debates we had. Should she say fuck or should she not say fuck? It's very silly, I know, but
right. Well, that sounds like the editing process for a lot of films we've tackled over the years and people we've spoken to. So that sounds bang on track. And you mentioned Eric's death and sort of maybe it being different and it being played out like he was mortally wounded and it was more like maybe putting him out of his misery. But I feel like in a way that would like mirror what Hannah was doing on both ends of the film. It would be too similar to that. So maybe it being more of a cold-blooded kill that Kate does.
It should definitely. Kate is always cold-blooded, but I think that what I was looking for from it is the ambiguity, right? And I think that because there was even scenes we ended up cutting them, but there was scenes where she was more tender with Hannah. Like they actually have much more direct interaction,
right? And
we cut that, and I think that was the right decision. And ideally, because the ambiguity exists in her, even if she's slightly tilted towards the dark side. But I agree with you. I think that I would much prefer you guys walk away and think of her as dangerous and a monster and not trustworthy than that wouldn't be my intent. My intent was more about how the desperation and brutality and the danger that Isaac's posed, despite Eric being this very elite soldier kind of thing. So that was kind of my idea. But anyways, I agree with you.
No, well, speaking of sort of the editing process, post-production, sort of wrapping up the making of the film, one thing we mentioned earlier on was the ending, plural, because there's the ending that was played in theaters, it's on a lot of the home releases, and then there's a bonus different ending, extended ending, on some of the Blu-ray features. And was there a discussion with that as well? What sort of happened with the ending?
So I don't know if it was actually so we always they definitely wanted some kind of happy ending, right? And so I don't know if it was a happy ending, but her returning, that was is that on the Blu-ray?
Yeah.
Is that what you see?
Her going back and live with the wolves and stuff.
Yeah, she goes back to the cabin. So we wrote that. We thought it would be really sweet. Like we thought it would be because she doesn't really get a lot of closure, which is probably pretty interesting actually now that I think about it. But she doesn't see Eric die. So it's like or at least I think we tried to make it work, but it didn't work out that way. And so it's like she still loves him. He's her father, right? And so we love the idea of her returning and I think we like wrapping herself in his coat. And I can't remember if that was us, like if that was if like I know for a fact that we all felt really bad for Hannah, even at like all the way through the end. And so we're like, what can we do to make it a little bit nice, a little bit warm and comforting? So we're literally, oh, let's wrap her in a coat, like let's wrap her in this, and I think that I'm not sure that it existed when I finally saw it. I went to London. I watched it with the Chemical Brothers. That was my first screening of it, and there was stuff that was in it towards the end that definitely got cut after we had our discussion. I can't remember if that was one of the scenes. The scene with Kate being with Hannah and being more inhumane and being, arguably warmer to her, that got cut. And that was in that one, because it just you end up losing the momentum a little bit of.
Sure.
And I don't think at that point it's the same concept, which is at that point you don't want Kate to be too humanized, right? Or Marissa to be too humanized. So it's like, especially with what's coming. So that got cut, and I would say that we got rid of that ending because it's just much more. I feel like it was from an earlier draft, which is I bookended it, right? I just missed your heart. I just missed your heart with the deer, and then there was that was always there. So that was the original, like those two things. And I'd have to go back and check, but I'm pretty sure that it ended like that in the first script, and where it just ends on her getting shot. So we, through our discussions, was like, well, how can we like, and maybe it was even to satisfy some note by the studio.
Sure.
But then we did what we did, and I think that it works for me. It speaks to me. It makes sense to me. So that would be. I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah.
No, you got it. You got it bang on. And I mean, the last question I sort of had about Hannah, I'll throw it to Cam afterwards in case he has anything else. But looking at, we were sort of trying to tell it in sort of a linear story of how this all happened, and now you've seen it in post-production, it's out in the world now. People are seeing the film. It did well. It still gets talked about now. I think more people should be talking about it. Just for you though, looking back on the process of making Hannah, are you happy with the finished product, with the film itself, and what are your thoughts on the process of making it?
Yeah, I'm very happy with it. It's very special to me. It's special to me for a lot of reasons, and probably a lot of reasons that no one else would find it special, because I can go, hey, I was sitting just over there off screen, and the people and meeting them, and like I said, like, look, I mean, like, let's get a little psychoanalysis, right? Like, so if Hannah is some kind of like avatar for me, right, which she was, right, she became she's an example of how I felt about the world when I was a teenager and going out into it and experiencing it for the first time. Having this opportunity, having this thing happen, like, to go and be a part of a community, it's this fabricated circus-like environment, but it was a community, was really special, because I got to meet a lot of very cool people and we all believed in the same thing. And so I'm always going to have a beautiful soft spot for that story and what it allowed and the people it allowed me to meet. So I can't fault it. I can't in my experience with it, being able to come back and to find and make sure that what I originally believed why this story needed to be told, and to be able to articulate that to people making it, including myself, was a really neat opportunity. So I feel very satisfied with how it turned out, and that I was able to not only inspire those people, but those people were able to inspire me, and I always remember that. So it's a document. It's like a diary. It's a diary of memories, and so it's, I mean, and it's a different viewing experience for me. So I can't objectively say, oh, this belongs on the knock list. I don't know if I can objectively say that, but you guys did, so, which I will take that as a huge compliment.
The fact that you just said not Clist warmed my heart anyway. Just to have it acknowledged is just nice anyway.
Love it.
That's
Good.
That's a
glad.
tick for me. I'll take that.
It's awesome.
Well, I was curious, you talk about just like what a personal film it is for you. And I'm just curious, with your travels you had, is there any moments in there throughout Hannah that really like jump out to you that like only I would get this, but this was a moment during my European travels that I brought to the screen?
This is interesting. I would say that it's more the feeling. Mm-hmm. So it's the fear, right? So and then also the joy. So it's like she's scared, right? You could argue she's maybe scared the whole time. And even though she has these skills, and it's the things that she's scared of aren't the things that maybe you and I would be scared of, like hanging out with a family. So or going on a thing. But then she goes, oh, wait a minute, I'm gonna go on this adventure with Sophie, and we're gonna go and we're gonna go with these boys, and we're gonna go do this thing. And it's like, so that concept of being scared and then going out on the adventure anyways, like that was traveling for me. It was, kind of like this like kind of suburban existence, and then I'm like, I'm just gonna go traveling. I'm gonna go see what that feels like, and it's scary. It's so scary. And I was by myself at least for the first week or two, and then and then I found my friends, and we were able to like travel together and hang out, and get ourselves into trouble, and then the one big thing that happened to me when I was traveling, and it's not a direct corollary, but it does feel that way sometimes, is like the traveling by yourself, being exposed to strangers, right? Who you're not sure if they're wonderful or if they're dangerous, even if they're doing something that is arguably feels intimidating. Like, so there was an instance when I was stuck in Budapest, and I was stuck in the train station. It was like 3:00 in the morning, and a man walked up to me, and I was wearing Oakley sunglasses, and he took my Oakley sunglasses off my face. He went and bought a beer, and then sat down and drank his beer with me right there. And it was like this weird thing where he's like, okay, you stole my sunglasses. you're drinking a beer with me. You're kind of my buddy, and I'm all by myself. And you know what? I'm going to be your buddy. So let's just hang out. And I don't mind that you just stole my sunglasses. So it's like this weird, like all that unsure, like the lack of the unknowns of what is and what is not a threat, right? I think that is what I would tie to. Like that's the thing I connect to. And then also, like, and at the end of the day, like, am I happy that I pushed the button, right? That I went out into the world? And I think that's still a question that needs to be answered. I don't know. So it's like, and I think that's the question that Hannah is still asking herself, right? So it's interesting. I don't know. That's a good question. I like that question a lot. It's a tough one.
Well, we love this film, and I'm glad we got to talk about it. I did have a couple of follow-ups. I think Cam had one as well, about sort of the life of Hannah after the film. And that is the Hanna TV show.
Yeah, well, okay.
Which I note the credits on that, and it's interesting to read. So just what's your experience with that?
It's non-existent. Yeah. So it's I was not involved. I feel like it was like a rights thing. So there was producers that were involved before. So my producer, the one I worked with on set, was Leslie Holleran, and then there was some producers before that I think I just randomly met. They had read the script, and somehow, because they had read the script, they ended up being attached to it, and they got involved.
Right.
And so at some point in the lifespan of whatever the contract, wherever they have, the rights, TV rights, reverted to them. And so then they went and took that and made the TV show. So I had no involvement other than, writing the script, the film. So yeah. Have you guys watched it?
I haven't. No.
I don't want. I haven't. I interestingly just didn't. I've never felt that compelled for like long form TV shows when it comes to spy stories. I feel like film is the best medium when it comes to spy stories a lot of the time. Much as I love this character, you think I want to watch more of it, but interesting knowing that you weren't connected as well. Maybe that's part of the sort of feeling I have inside not to watch it. The man who brought it to the world hasn't been on board. But like, so have you watched it? I think is a more interesting question.
No, I haven't. I mean, it's so funny. It's like it's so full of, it's brimming with all these very talented people. It's I'm not sure. Like, I think I'm of the same opinion. Like, if I can detach myself from it, which is, I'm not sure that. I don't know if I'd want to watch that type of story in long form. So I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever watch it, but I definitely avoided it. Probably for just because it's like that's hard. It's hard. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I was curious on like any status updates you had on like Shadow of the Colossus or anything else you're working on. And I guess now that the strike has been settled.
Yeah. No. Like, so Shadow of the Colossus is, I don't know what's happening with that. That's been quiet for a very long time. And then my other projects, I'm currently on my Cronenberg. I'm in my Cronenberg phase of life. So I'm writing a lot of weird horror right now.
Nice.
And so there's little things that are percolating. I did an adaptation of a Robert Silverberg short story called Hospital Station, which I'm very excited about, and I hope it goes somewhere, and we'll see. And then it's kind of these original stories that are pop up every once. Like, so I have I have a handful of I have another female spy story called Governess, that could maybe go somewhere, but that's also every couple of, Governess has existed since 2010, so every couple of years,
wow,
somebody gets interested in it, and then so it's like, and it's just the life of a script where it's like every once in a while something interesting happens. So that would be my, I feel like my spy stories. I have a couple of them, but I must say that in recent history I've gone full horror.
Sign me up for that too.
Which would, maybe I need to go back. I mean, need to go back. I would definitely say, after listening to you guys, I'm like, oh, I should dust off some of those concepts that I have sitting in my drawer. But yeah, I love hearing it.
See how I feel once you watch Ipcris File. That might give you some inspiration. That's
okay. Give me some inspiration. Fantastic. I love it.
And if you want to write in like two really inept British and Canadian spy that get blown up or something in the background, name Cam and Scott. I
will do it. I will name my next the two characters. The main characters will be named Cam and Scott. I promise.
Oh no! We need to be like background guys that are doing the
okay,
IT or something. We don't deserve to be front and center.
I promise.
No. We're the guys in the van. Well, I think the last thing to ask you, Seth, the last thing to really dig down into, and the final question we ask every guest on the show.
Yeah.
Seth Lochhead, what is your favorite spy movie of all time?
Oh, okay. I don't know if it's my favorite spy movie of all time, but I was on an Oliver Reed kick.
Okay.
And I watched Assassination Bureau. Have you guys seen this?
With Diana Riggs.
No.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And it was is it Telly Savalas?
Telly Savalas, yeah. There's someone else as well that's got some spy connections. But yeah, weird film.
Yeah, it's very weird.
Yeah.
But there's two things why I loved it. Well, I actually watched it in parallel with oh my gosh, and I'm totally blanking. What's the Bond movie where it's the one with Diana Riggs? What's
On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Yeah, okay. So I watched them in connection with each other. So I was like, because what I'd heard was that Oliver Reed was supposed to be Bond in that movie, and there was like some kind of weird thing that happened. So he did Assassination. So it's not a great movie, but I love Oliver Reed and I love Diana Riggs, and I thought you guys have to watch it and do an analysis on this, that it was the inspiration, and I can't find anything online about this, for Kingsman. So that's my thesis. I need you guys to figure out if I'm right.
Okay.
And So I don't know why I thought that. I'll have to rewatch it and tell you guys. But yeah, so I thought that was a good deep cut for you guys. Pretty. It's a B movie. Let's be honest. But
It's on our master list to tackle. At least
yeah,
I've told Cam to put it on anyway, so hopefully it is on there.
It's there.
It's there, right? So Cam has put it on the master list. So maybe I'll bump it up the list to tackle sooner rather than later because it's been getting a lot of play on TV here recently as well, actually. So that would be interesting one to take a look at. But yeah, it's an odd film, but I've never tried the course between it and Kingsman. I'll have a look at that.
Yeah, I don't know why I thought that, but now I want to see if I'm right.
we'll get to the bottom of it. Don't worry. But it's interesting because you're the first person to mention that film on the podcast. So
awesome.
Yeah, I like to track people who give the same answer when we do interviews. So there's a lot of like, oh, On Her Majesty's is one that gets brought up a lot, or things like Spy Game, stuff like that.
And that was great, by the way. That
Wonderful.
was like, you get missed. There's a good example actually of here's a great human. Well, maybe not the Bond so much, but Diana Riggs is so fucking great in it, and it's like, and I got a little misty at the end, man. I got and I'm like, that's a good action movie right there. You care so much about them, so it's like, yeah. So that's a good one, and I only seen that. I just watched that last year. I feel I was watching going all through the deep cuts, and then what was the one that I really liked? The Bond where he's in Japan.
Oh, well, you only
really
twice.
That one. Yeah, I really like that one, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's.
I'm a big fan of that one. I love that. You only live twice. I just like being in Japan. I think the vibe is great. It was
so cool. Yeah, I agree. So all the Sean Connerys were great, and then, but yeah, so it's like, no, Bond, of course. Like Bond's really, and when you're a kid, you watch all the Bonds on TV. They're always on TV, so it must have deeply embedded in my DNA for sure. I always think about them probably too much when I'm writing, and always trying to deconstruct them. But anyways, yeah. So Assassination Bureau, yeah, it's pretty fun.
Well, I'll give you a little bit of Oliver Reed spy homework if you'd like it, an additional film that will make you laugh or cry, one of the two, and that is Condor Man from the 1980s.
Condor Man,
Disney spy superhero film.
I love it. I've never heard of it.
Write it down.
I'm writing it down.
And enjoy your afternoon with Condor Man with Barbara Carrera, Michael Crawford, and Oliver Reed.
I love it.
Yeah, and then drop us a line afterwards and tell us what you think of Condor Man. It's a very different film to Hannah, I'll tell you that.
All right.
But
I'm excited.
I'm excited to hear what you think of it because it's one of my favorite films, but not for the right reasons.
Not for the right reasons.
Not for the right reasons. But Seth, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here on the show. Finally, I'm glad we could get to the bottom of Hannah. You both know we love it. Thank you for the film, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm a big fan of yours, guys, and I continue what you're doing, and I will always seek out your recommendations 100%.
Definitely, and thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
And we're back, folks. I want to thank Seth once again for taking the time to speak with us. I loved Hannah going into this interview, and somehow I love it even more.
Yeah, no kidding. And what I thought was really interesting about this story, about the writing and the making of Hannah, you and I have talked to a number of writers who, for their first film, came up with a passion project where they wrote the draft, and then they were replaced by another writer who came in and basically took the movie to the finish line, and then it was shot.
Yep.
It happens time and time again. But I was so interested to hear and encouraged to hear that, Seth had the opportunity to, although Hannah did go through a rewrite process with a different writer, he was able to come back and see it to fruition. A lot like Michael Frost Beckner, who wrote Spy Game and also had a rewrite process, but they ultimately realized it was more his vision, and he was the guy who was able to kind of see that movie to the, also to the finish line.
And more to your point, our Christmas present last year was our interview with J.D. Zeik, who initially wrote Ronin, the wonderful 90s spy film. But that was rewritten, and he was kind of frozen out of that process too. So it was nice to see that yes, that's sort of brought back into the fold and helped usher it to fruition. So yeah, I'm glad for Seth, and I'm glad that the story had a happy ending, which most fairy tales often do.
Scott, you didn't continue my football analogies, as I am so wont to do, given my history of competitive football.
Well, it is the time of year. It's a lot of football on television. I imagine in North America. There's some here. I guess I never watch it. I wouldn't know.
I honestly don't have a clue. I don't think so. Not this time of year.
You're not out there playing with your pig skins?
Well, maybe after we finish this recording.
Perhaps so. But yeah, let's talk about a little bit about our chat with Seth. I mean, I was fascinated to hear like just the genesis of the story and his sort of process of putting it together, going through film school and having that goal of making a script and selling it and making a film, which he inevitably did. Although I would like to hear a little bit more about this teen comedy that he wrote.
Maybe one day. But yeah, it's the one thing I was really wondering. I was wondering several things, but one thing that was really at the forefront of my mind was just like the balancing of the elements with Hannah. Because when I watched the movie, I'm like, okay, this is a coming of age story. You have spy story elements very strongly. You've also got this fairy tale element, and I was very curious, like how these kind of different strands all work together. And I think he did a fantastic job in communicating to us and to all of you listening how Hannah became this very interesting, unique spy story.
I found in the past that, they say write what you know. Now, I don't think Seth was, had his DNA manipulated and became a super spy, but he understood a lot of the sort of the situations that Hannah was going through in the film, and I think infused the story with a lot of situations that he dealt with, which he spoke about. And, that write what you know thing seems to shine through here. I think what is key to putting this story together is that he knew exactly the story he wanted to tell, and he was able to bring it to the finish line. And I think having that grounding and having that experience of traveling Europe, which is not something I've done, but you've traveled Europe, you've traveled Australia, you kind of have an idea of what that backpacking sensation is like, and maybe a little bit of idea of what that fear is like.
I feel like I was too dim to be scared. When I backpacked, I was too oblivious. I was just wide-eyed, being like, where are we going? What are we doing now? Okay, I guess.
Is that a kangaroo? I'll go say hi. Cool.
I should note, I did not travel on my own like he did, which I think I would have been really scared. I would have gone through that real fearful experience that, he said was kind of aligned with what Hannah went through. I went with a friend who was much better with directions than I was, and so it was like, thank God.
Yeah, well, without that friend, you wouldn't be here. You would have been killed by that kangaroo.
That's right. Yeah, very true.
They pulled you away, and the rest was history. Something I really enjoyed about the story of making this film is just how much kind of, I don't want to say fell into place, but sometimes things are cosmic. Things are just sort of meant to be. And I feel like this story was meant to be told. He willed it into existence. That had that option in college, which story to write. Was told to write the teen comedy, but he felt like, no, I have to write this, and wrote it and got a manager and got it in front of several people and turned down other offers to work with Focus here in the UK. And I think the BBC were involved as well. And just that sheer persistence of coming back, because like you mentioned, like people like JD Zeik, I could see people getting very bitter with the whole idea of it being passed on to another writer, but he was happy to come back and keep going at it.
And also this determination to sell it to people who would make the interesting movie.
Yeah.
And I do not fault any writer out there who gets their script optioned by a company that just wants to turn it into something kind of middle-of-the-road action film or something.
Blockbuster, make money, yada, yada, yada.
Sure, yeah. It is very difficult as a writer in Hollywood to sell scripts and to make money. So I don't fault any writer that goes that route, but I give Seth a lot of points for sticking to his guns, appropriate term there,
nice.
And making sure that like this interesting concept he had was handled by people ultimately who would carry it into something that would mirror a little bit of what he was seeing. Like Joe Wright may have made a movie that brought elements that he didn't necessarily think would be as overt, like the fairy tale imagery he talked about. But by waiting and picking focus, it wound up with a filmmaker who was going to make a unique and interesting movie.
Yeah, and one thing I was sort of saddened to hear, but wholly unsurprised, was some of like the notes he was getting from executives, and a lot of what was being said when the script went through rewrites with David Farr was a lot of stuff like, hey, the protagonist should be a man, hey, what if we got rid of some of this like metaphor
Mhm.
and sort of made it a bit more action shootery? Which, if you go down that well, your film becomes The Grey Man.
Well, those are the least surprising notes I think I've ever heard.
Yeah.
The idea of a female-fronted spy film in 2011 and earlier, because the script was obviously picked up prior to that. None of these notes surprised me whatsoever.
No, it does make you wonder who is leading in Hollywood right now, because you look at some of these franchises falling apart. We recently saw Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1 just tumbleweeds at the box office, and it's not even that bad of a film.
No, it's a great one.
Yeah, I just wonder like what's occurring up top. Who is making these decisions? Because I think it's a little bit of a committee groupthink thing going on at the moment. I think we need more projects being led by people who have a vision, and I think this is where Seth comes back into my point, because he had a unique vision for a unique film, and that's what we got.
Mm-hmm. No, I always think writers tend to have very unique ideas, and it's will they be stamped down on before it reaches the screen? Because there's no shortage of movies that you'll go and see, and you'll sit there and go like, boy, this is a really generic action movie, and you'll see the writing credits, and there's like 5 writers on it. And you're like, wait a second, what happened here?
Yeah. Or you see a film or a TV show with like 15 exec producers.
Mm-hmm.
You just think,
Mm-hmm.
oh boy, what's going to happen? One thing I also wanted to point out, which I didn't know, and it's not in any sort of the IMDb, Wikipedia page, anything like that, any of the trivia for the film, is how much Tom Hollander's character was sort of written on set. And how much there's some ad-libbing going on there, apparently. We didn't get into the nitty-gritty of like which line was which, because it's probably too much information, but it's nice to know that was a collaborative process. And I can't shake the idea of Tom Hollander scaring people on set with his steel pipe.
Tom Hollander is incredible in this movie. Like when I was making my notes for this interview, I had Tom Hollander like underline double, and I was just like, I can't wait to talk about this character, because I was doing my rewatch of the movie last night. And it's like, Tom Hollander is not an actor who I am, like, I've seen him in things, but he doesn't normally, like, leap to the forefront of the movie for me. I don't tend to walk away being like, oh my god, that Tom Hollander performance. I remember him probably best for the Pirates sequels, where he was the main villain, especially in the third one.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, he's one of those, like, reliable actors you'll see pop up all the time, but his performance in this is so go for broke, so bananas, and the character is so memorable that, like, the movie, it's just like a bolt of electricity every time he shows up on screen. And so I was so excited to hear about this kind of collaborative process of achieving this very unique character.
Yeah, I think it just adds another element, another flavor to the character that we already love, knowing that it was spur of the moment, but creatively driven, and it was a lot of creative juices flowing on set. And I think that lends itself to the finished product. You can tell it's a very creative film. It isn't a sort of a paint by numbers spy action thriller. I mentioned Grey Man. Chuck anything you'd like into that mold. The Heart of Stone. Anything in that sort of, if we're talking recent films, this is a very unique, vibrant, vital film, I think, to watch. That's why it made the knock list. And I think I hope that by doing this interview and talking about it online and bring it to the forefront, people will go and check this film out, because and not to be too inside baseball, as it were, and going behind the scenes of how the SpyHards sausage is made. Not an image you want in your head, folks. I apologize. But Hannah is not getting the sort of download numbers the episode itself that like a Bond or a Mission Impossible episode would be getting. But I feel like this is as vital a spy film to watch as any of the films I've just mentioned. If you love spy films and you've never watched Hannah, I mean, that's what the knock list is for, but you're missing out.
Yeah, and I was really excited to add this one to the knock list back in the day, because it was our first, I think, kind of unconventional addition to the list. We'd added North by Northwest and Goldeneye, and I think the Ipcris file might have been on at this point as well. But adding Hannah was kind of like we are opening up what the knock list can be. It can introduce movies that maybe aren't on the like top 10 list you're going to find, just on Google, where you're just going to see all the obvious titles. We wanted things on this list that represent like the variety of what spy films can be. And I think Hannah is one of the more modern examples where I sit forward and go like, please, like more unconventional approaches like this. I don't need, a billion kind of Netflix spy thrillers that all feel the same.
No, I mean, looking at the list right now, it was the third film to enter the knock list.
Oh, wow.
Ipcress File came afterwards. But, it did open the door. And I think thanks to Hannah, we have films like Spy in Black. We have films like The Parallax View, Five Fingers, M. Butterfly, to name a few on the knock list that, as Cam said, you wouldn't be seeing on, Blender's top 10 spy films or, Vulture, 15 spy films you should watch before you die list. We're trying to craft a bit more of a deep cut list here.
Or even Ghost in the Shell, the original animated film as well.
Great. Perfect example as well. Perfect example. But I'm so glad that we did this. I'm so glad we had the opportunity to speak to Seth and to sort of set the record straight on some of the details behind the scenes making of this film. Hopefully they'll be added to the Wikipedia page at some point if you listening at home want to do that. But thank you all for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this very late Christmas present from ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think this is actually our last episode of 2023.
That's right. And what a great way to go out, because back in the day, we weren't able to do an interview on Hannah when we were kind of covering the movies, week to week as we normally do. And so it was really fun to catch up with this one later because it's really stuck in our minds. Like some of the movies we talk about, even the ones that make the knock list, we'll be really excited about them. We'll do the episode, but it's not like we keep bringing up those movies in conversation over like the next, 3 years, I guess we've been doing this show or so. Whereas how many times have I, when I'm explaining the knock list to a guest, referenced Hannah as a movie that made the list? It's happened a lot. It always kind of sticks in my mind.
It's one of the ones. Yeah, it's one of the ones you go to. And like I was rewatching the film yesterday as well in preparation for this, and I remember I was watching the sort of prison escape at the start, and I was like listening to the soundtrack is blaring and Hannah's killing people. It's great. And then like the lights are flickering and you hear electricity. And I said to myself, oh, that's very like David Lynch. And I went back and listened to our episode and I said the same thing. It's like, it's cool that I've forgotten I said it, but got the same thing out of it. And I'm taking things from this film, but I don't think I could say the same about Spy Kids Armageddon.
Sure. That's a very fair point.
Yeah. But, again, I want to thank you all for tuning in to this episode. I want to thank you for tuning into this whole previous year, this year of 2023 worth of SpyHards podcast. It's been a great year with some high highs.
Yes, and who knows what 2024 will bring. But Scott, I guess next week we are going to wrap up the year that was 2023. We're going to look at what made the knock list this past year. We're going to look also at our favorite moments. All that sort of thing. Surprises, disappointments. Basically, it'll be along the lines of what we've done previous year-end wrap-ups, but I'm sure there'll be a few surprises as well.
Yeah, I always look forward to this episode, Cam. It's nice to sort of go off script a little bit and do something slightly out of the usual SpyHards mold. Plus, along with sort of analyzing the year that was, we'll have some highlights and we'll have some messages from listeners and their favorite moments too. So it's a lovely way to sort of wrap up the year of 2023 and move into 2024. So your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to join us next week as we say goodbye to the year of 2023 SpyHards style. And if you like what you heard on this interview, please consider leaving us a 5-star review wherever you are listening, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, anything like that. Let us know. Leave us a 5-star review. We'd love to see them. And don't forget to follow us discreetly on social media at SpyHards. That's SpyHards on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But until next year, folks, you'll find me playing with Tom Hollander's steel rod.